What in the world is going on with One UI 7? Let's go. One UI 7 is delayed, at least unofficially. We know that based on the timelines that have been leaked on social media. From the brand that promised us 7 years of software updates, we're off to a rocky start, to say the least. But instead of just throwing labels at Samsung and Samsung creators and that as well, let's try and break it down, apply some context, and look at some of the evidence that we have to sort of discuss what is actually going on. Firstly, there's a lot of this stuff around Galaxy AI, and a lot of people are saying that things like the Now Brief won't work on S24. There's a lot of throwing accusations out there based on really limited information, and people are drawing conclusions. Is Galaxy AI a reason why S24 hasn't been updated to One UI 7 yet? Especially with all of the new Galaxy AI features that are on here on the S25 with One UI 7, what is actually going to come back, and are they going to be capable of handling it on the previous models? There's a couple of different schools of thought. First one for me is that the S25 processor, the 8 Elite for Galaxy, is heavily in tune with these new Galaxy AI features. It's kind of been co-designed with Qualcomm, at least the 4 Galaxy part, to be optimized and support a lot of these on-device processing features that Galaxy AI now has. And then when you look back at previous models, 8 Gen 3 for Galaxy, but then there's also Exynos to consider as well. Are those chips capable of running those on-device processors, or does Samsung need to build cloud servers to handle it? That could be a reason why we haven't seen it yet, because there's a lot of maybe testing or building of things that needs to take place before Samsung can bring them back to the older models. And maybe they weren't prepared for how many features they were going to bring back, and maybe that mandate has changed. That's all stuff we don't know, but at least that's could be an option, could be something that's happening. The other aspect of it too is that there's Google to consider. Google sort of, I guess, hosts maybe a lot of the back end for a lot of the Galaxy AI features that exist. So potentially they aren't ready for 64 million or whatever the sales figure is to S24 devices to get updated to One UI 7 that will support all of those. They're just opinions and thoughts. They might not be exactly what's happening, but it could be some context that we want to apply. And there's no blaming or shifting, it's just what could be happening. The second facet of it is that there's optimizations from the rest of the One UI 7 update, because it's not just about Galaxy AI, as some people are accusing it of being. There's sort of subtle refinements to how you interact, animations, fluidity, that need to, I guess, be optimized for not just S24, but S23, S22 users. They need to be considered as well. It's not just about last year's flagship users. It goes back a couple of generations. And as I said, with Galaxy AI, there could be hardware limitations that they need to find workarounds for. What is important? What isn't important? What can they apply that gives a similar experience or the same experience, but also that suits the hardware that exists? Samsung could probably release One UI 7 as is. With the Beta 3 that's on the S24 Ultra, I think that could service a lot of people and maybe keep them happy. But it's not as close to the experience as what's on here. So I think if they were to release it now, S24 users would be upset. They would complain, we're not getting the full One UI 7 experience. And I totally understand that. So Samsung probably do as well. And in their mind, it's probably better to release a software update that many more thousands of people can enjoy, as opposed to the few people in the tech bubble. Because you can imagine, if Samsung just released One UI 7 now in its current state, and it was buggy and there was things that maybe people didn't enjoy, the complaints would be far worse than if it is late, which it is. Because 95% of consumers, probably the majority, don't actually know that there's an update coming. They wouldn't have a clue. But if those people update their phone and the experience is worse or buggy, that is worse for Samsung than the 5% not getting One UI 7 at all. They will though, so let's calm down. There's some pretty heavy-handed accusations being leveled at Samsung. And look, by all means, if you feel that way, go for it. They're a big multinational, multi-trillion conglomerate. They can handle it. Absolutely. But there's got to be more to it than they're just scamming us. They just has to be. I'm not apologizing or coping. I'm fine. I'll be just fine whether One UI 7 comes out or doesn't. Honestly, even if I didn't have an S25 Ultra, Sure, I might get impatient, might be like, where is it? But I'm not going to be angry. It's a software update. Living in the bubble that we live in, it's easy to think that, hey, the world revolves around us. Smartphone companies build smartphones for us in the tech bubble, where we are all that exists. That is just not the case. A lot of people are sort of saying that Samsung dangling the S25 with One UI 7 in our face is them saying, hey, if you want One UI 7 now, get an S25. It's a sales ploy. Obviously, it's a tactic to get us to upgrade to a phone just for the software, even though it's coming back later. But we'll delay the later software. I just don't buy that. And there's a couple of reasons why. Us in the tech bubble, we're smart, mostly. We know that One UI 7 is going to come back to the Galaxy S24 and S23 and S22. We know that because Samsung have told us. And because we know that, we're not going to rush out and buy a new phone just to get the new software update, especially if funds limited. We know it's coming eventually. We'll just be patient. Angry, but patient. And we also wouldn't want to validate that tactic of buy the new phone to get the new software. That's not what we're about. And two, I touched on this earlier, the general smartphone using public don't even know timelines for software updates. If you picked a random person off the street, there's a massive percentage chance that they have no idea what you're talking about. If you ask them when their phone's getting a software update, they'll either say too many times or, I don't know, I haven't updated it since I bought it. That's likely the two answers you'll receive. And then of that general smartphone using public who maybe are aware, there's an even probably smaller percentage of people who would upgrade just to get the latest software. And that doesn't necessarily translate into a huge volume of sales. So just for Samsung to potentially risk their loyal user base getting upset over that small percentage that would upgrade, it's just not a long-term financial solution that's worth exploring. I think it's less a money grab, more stability for the older phones to ensure it runs properly. But the biggest thing missing from all of this, it's not the actual update itself, it's communication from Samsung, letting us know what the timeline is with a statement or even communicating it through the tech community, through the various fan websites that exist, Sam Mobile being one that I work for, would ultimately give everyone some transparency over what's happening. The thing that I see as well is people like to exploit the situation for their own benefit, for engagement. They like to spread information based off a very loose bit of information they've read and draw definitive conclusions. And that is purely for their own benefit. There's absolutely no benefit for the wider tech community because all it does, it creates hysteria, it creates confusion, and draws people's aggression out in ways that shouldn't exist because that information could be false. And we've seen that already with the S Pen and that whole saga. I like to stay composed, look for answers and context as opposed to just throwing negativity out there because it's very easy to be negative. And usually being negative will draw you the most engagement. I hope this doesn't sound like cope or bias. It's literally just looking at it with a clear head and seeing past the anger as to what could be happening. Either way, Samsung need to tell us what's going on. One UI 7, we're halfway through February. When you consider when One UI updates have come in the past, we're about 4 to 5 months overdue. Let us know what you think in the comments. Keep it civil. Don't want any aggression. And I'll see you guys in the next one. You!